Welcome to Psych Talk. I'm your host, Dr. Jessica Rabin, a licensed clinical psychologist. If you are a mental health professional, student in the social science field, or just interested in psychology and mental health, this podcast is for you. Although topics discussed on this podcast are similar to therapy, Psych Talk is not a replacement for therapy and is for educational and entertainment purposes only. So let's dive into today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to Psych Talk, and thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. Today I have a very special guest with me, Dr. Rob Scheer, who is the founder of Comfort Cases, an author, and most importantly, a dad. So Rob, thank you so much for being here today.
Jessica, thank you so much for giving me this platform. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
I am so excited as well. I'm so excited to get to know you and about everything that you do. But before we jump into the conversation, do you mind introducing yourself,
Sure.
a little bit
Yeah.
about your background, what you
Yeah.
do,
So
anything you
it's
want
so
to share?
crazy. Yeah. So again, my name is Rob Scheer, and I am the founder of an international nonprofit called Comfort Cases. But for me, I have the greatest title in the world. I'm a dad. A dad. See, the thing is, Jessica, that's all I ever wanted.
Mhm.
Ever since I was a little boy, I remember most kids, you think about being astronauts and football players and teachers and doctors. Never. I only
Right.
thought about being a dad. And I remember even being a boy who had been in foster care, who had aged
Mhm.
out of the system, who was homeless. And still, when I was in my early 20s, I kept thinking, is that day ever going to happen? See, the
Mhm.
fact is being a gay man, growing up, never knowing what family truly was supposed to be about, didn't never have any decent role models, but being that dad who could protect my children, who could make sure that my kids knew that when they walked into the home, they were safe, who knew that when they walked into the home, there were food in the refrigerator and that there were people there that were excited to see them. See, I never experienced that. And that's all I
Yeah.
wanted. So that's me.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I can tell how much you love being a dad, even though as we were talking about right before, your kids are like all grown and
Yes.
I
But
mean,
they
you're
all
still
still live at
obviously a
home.
dad.
Yeah. They all still live
Do
at
you love
home.
that or
I mean, it's different. See, your little ones are little, and I
yeah.
remember when we were going through the diapers and the play dates, and
Hmm.
now we just went to prom with our
Yeah.
youngest, and so it's a different relationship at this age,
Hmm.
and so it's so crazy because I talked to my husband about this. My husband's a stay-at-home dad, and so
Okay.
he has the hardest job in the world.
Hmm.
So my husband he is the most incredible parent, but he really related to those kids when they were younger.
Yeah.
And so um it's different, it's a different role model now. It's because I really relate to our kids now that they're older. So it's so neat to
Hmm.
see the dynamics of our family. But yeah, we're a family of seven and love it.
That's wonderful. So you mentioned that you were a child, adolescent, and you aged out of the foster care system. So do you mind sharing a little bit about your personal experience
Sure.
within the foster care system?
The thing is I've told this story so many times, and I say it all the time. If I can tell the story and that it can impact one person, if one person who's listening, who maybe has gone through the system, or maybe they're going through the system, or they're getting ready to age out of the system, the thing that I always want people to hear is the fact is that you have an opportunity to write the pages of your own book. No
Hmm.
matter what anybody delivers to you, you get to decide how you take that and what you
Hmm.
deal with it. See, I'm the youngest of 10 kids. My mother had been married 6 times. We lived in and
Wow.
out of every shelter in Maryland, Virginia, DC. I never once remember a picture on the wall. I never once remember a holiday. I never once remember her saying, I love you. But what I remember is that man I was supposed to call dad, the monster that she allowed to come and live with us no matter where we ended up. See, I'm 59 years old, and every day I'm reminded of that man because of the cigarettes that he would put out on me. See, that was my dad. That was my family. And people look in and they judge and they make comments, but I remind everyone those were the parents that were delivered to me. And for
Hmm.
me, when I walked into foster care, I didn't see my brothers and sisters again. And knowing that 75% of kids who enter foster care that actually have a sibling, they get split up, split up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my journey.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. And we will talk more about the foster care system in general in a little bit. But because of your experience, you started Comfort Cases, a
Yeah.
nonprofit organization. So I want to kick off like our discussion. Can you tell us about Comfort Cases? What inspired you to start it and anything you want to share about this wonderful organization?
Well, first of all, Jessica, I'm a banker by trade. So I come
Oh,
from the
really?
dot com. Yeah, I come from the dot com world. I was a banker for 28 years. See, when you're a kid in foster care, you normally have nothing. Just as
Hmm.
exactly what I had, nothing. And when I aged out of foster care, I literally was homeless. And I slept on the streets my entire senior year of high school. And I
Wow.
remember thinking to myself when I graduated high school is that I was never going to talk about foster care again. I was never going to allow people to know that I was the kid that used to eat out of the trash can. I was never going to talk about the trash bag that I would carry. And so for me, it was about being this fake person that I thought I was going
Hmm.
to be. And by the way, you might call me Dr. Scheer. I don't even know the difference between there, and there. Um, you know, so I
Yeah.
mean, the thing is that I just had to make it. And so that's what I did. I ended up becoming a very successful businessman, and I never looked back. I met my husband over 21 years ago, and about 17 and a half years ago, my husband and I were sitting in our brownstone in DC. And by the way, I was living the life. I
Hmm.
had made it. I had an amazing home, expensive cars, tons of money, cocktail parties, you name it. I've been all over the world. And my husband and I decided to start our family. And by the way, we didn't know any gay people that had kids.
Oh,
And I
wow.
just knew that I was going to be a dad. And I said, okay, we're going to adopt overseas. And my husband was like, wait a minute. Why are we not adopting out of foster care? And I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, I know about those kids. And he was like, you were one of those kids. Oh my God, he was so right. I
Hmm.
was one of those kids. And I was so worried about what everybody else thought about me that I forgot about all the kids who were in foster care. So
Yeah.
my husband and I ended up filling out all the paperwork, taking the classes, and we waited. We wanted that cute little baby and be that cute gay couple in DC with the rich, expensive stroller. And next thing you know, the phone rang. And they said, hey, Mr. Shear, hey, guess what? I said, what? They said, we have two kids. I said, wait, I only want one. And they said, we have a brother and sister. We have a little girl who's 4 and her brother who's 2. And by the way, you're going to be their third placement. They're going to be reunified with their birth mother, but they need a place to sleep tonight. I said, I'll see you at 7 o'clock. Jessica, at 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and there the worker was with my beautiful daughter Amaya and our son Makai. And the saddest thing for me, though, is I saw my daughter and son there. Both of them had this, a trash bag. See, the thing is that we see one child every 2 minutes entering foster care in the United States, 700 a day. They enter because of a choice that someone else made, and then we make the choice and give them a trash bag. Wow.
Yeah.
You know, Nelson Mandela said it so clearly. Each and every one of us in society are judged by the way we treat our children. Kids in foster care, they don't belong to you. They don't belong to me. They belong to us. And all of a
Hmm.
sudden, I had these two kids standing there with a trash bag, and they didn't even have pajamas or a baby's blanket. But for me, it was about being a dad. Month 1, month 2, month 3 goes by, the phone rings. Hey, Mr. Shear. Hey, guess what? What? We have two more kids. I said, whoa, I already have two kids. They said, we have two more. We have a little boy who is 2 and his brother who is 6 months. They're being fast tracked for adoption and they really need a place. And I said, I'll see you at 7. I went home and Reese was in the kitchen with Amaya and Makai. And I said, Reese, I got these two boys. And he said, Rob, we have two kids. I said, I know, but they have these two boys and they're being fast tracked for adoption. And I think I really need them. Reese
Hmm.
said, we have to talk about this. I said, we have until 7 o'clock. And so
We
sure
can't.
enough,
We.
Yeah, let's do it. And at 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and at 7 o'clock, there were my boys, my sweet boy Grayson, who was 2, and his little brother Tristan, who was 6 months. And all of a sudden, we became two dads with 4 kids. And life was crazy. We went through about a year of that craziness, and then we adopted all 4 of them. And the first thing I did was get them passports. I put them in private schools, designer clothes,
Mhm.
travel all over the world. And then 14 years ago, I'm sitting in my office in Rockville, Maryland, and my husband had given up his career to be a stay-at-home dad. And he had walked into my office so we could do the yearly toy drive that we would all do. And, I mean, we gather all those toys for those
Yep.
needy kids. We pat ourselves on the back. And on December the 26th, we all wake up. Half of us don't even think about those kids. And by the way, 3/4 of the toys already broken. I said to Reese, we failed our kids. He said, what do you mean? I said, Reese, we forgot to teach our kids two of the most important things. He was like, what is that? I was like, their legacy. See,
Mhm.
Jessica, the thing is that we must understand is that our legacy is what we give, not what we take. And then empathy. See, the thing is that empathy is not in our DNA. Empathy is taught. I said, Reese, I want to do something. He said, what? I opened up my desk drawer and I pulled out this trash bag. And I said, I'm going to eliminate these in foster care in DC. He said, you're a batshit crazy. I said, I know. That's why you married me. I said, so we gathered some of our, members of our church, some local
Mhm.
politicians, my senior staff, and I shared the story. The story of a 12-year-old little boy who had walked into foster care carrying a trash bag. The same boy at the age of 18 who was handed that bag again and that tried to define him. That same young boy who decided that the system was not going to define him and he wasn't going to blame the system. Instead, he was going to teach his children that each and every one of us have an opportunity to change the system. So, with that, we grabbed a backpack. And in that backpack, we put a brand new pair of pajamas with a tag on it. I wanted to make sure that every child got their own lotion, their own shampoo, their own conditioner, and their own bar of soap. See, kids actually walk into a house of strangers. We
Mhm.
expect them to assimilate like that. Not acceptable. We
Right.
all walk into hotels. As we go into those hotels, we're all given a brand new bar of soap. The reason
Mhm.
for that is called dignity. The strangers that stayed in that room before you, you're not going to use that bar of soap. And children shouldn't do it either. And then
Mhm.
I want every kid to get a toothbrush and toothpaste. And by the way, my beautiful teeth and my teeth are beautiful. They cost me an arm and a leg. Woo! Nobody bothered to give me a toothbrush when I was a kid in the
Yeah.
system. And then I want every kid to get an activity. I want all kids to get an age-appropriate book. I want every
Mhm.
kid to get a stuffed animal because I don't care whether you're a newborn or you're 59. We all love a good stuffed animal.
Yep.
And then finally, my son Grayson, he was 5 when we packed our very first case. He's now 19. He said, Daddy, we have to put a blankie in every case. And I was like, a blankie? I was like, Grayson, these kids are not cold. He said, I know, Daddy. But every time they put themselves up in their blankie, they know we love them. Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, isn't that what we all want? We want to be loved. We want to know we matter. And with that, we packed a case and another and another. And in the last 14 years, we have packed and delivered over 320,000
Oh
cases.
my
We
gosh.
have delivered them to all 50 states, DC and Puerto Rico. And in
Wow.
2021, in the height of the pandemic, when no one knew what they were doing, my family went to the UK and opened up a center there where we serve close to 84,000 children in the United Kingdom. That's
Wow.
comfort cases.
I have so many follow-up questions, but also like I'm just like so touched right now hearing your story and the impact that you have made on so many
Yeah.
lives of children. And the fact that you're not, it started with you wanting to help foster kids in DC
Yeah.
and how
That's
much
it.
it has expanded,
Yeah.
not even just across the US,
Well, let me tell you the
internationally as
crazy
well.
thing. In 2018, Derek Jeter published my memoir, A Forever Family. And I remember I went to my husband in the beginning of 2019, and I said, um, I think I'm going to sell the businesses, and I think I'm going to become a public speaker. And my husband was like, "You do know you're the breadwinner of this family." And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "But I think I could do this." And so
Mhm.
I ended up going on a book tour, and I realized that I no longer wanted a job, that I actually
Mhm.
wanted a purpose. I wanted to go around the country and educate people about kids like me. I happened to walk into a local high school in 2019, and I told my story. And a young
Mhm.
boy walked up to me and he said, "Hey, Mr. Shear, will you sign my book?" And I said, "Of course. What is your name?" He said, "Alex." I said, "Alex, tell me something about yourself." He said, "I have nothing to tell." I said, "Alex," I said, "we all have a story." He said, "No, my story's like yours." He's like, "I've been in foster care since I was 5. I've been in 11 homes, 6 schools. I'm 18 years old. I'm getting ready to age out, and I'm going to be homeless just like you." That hit me so hard. I said,
Yeah.
"Alex, it doesn't have to go that way." He said, "No, Mr. Shear, I've fallen through the cracks of child welfare." I looked at the principal and she had a tear going down her eye. She said, "Mr. Shear, Alex has a 3.6 and we don't know what to do." I actually handed Alex my business card and I said, "Alex, I want you to call me." I was like, "We're going to figure this out. I have to go give another talk." I went home that night. I told Reese and the kids about meeting this young boy. And my son Mackay said, "Daddy, if he calls, invite him to our house for dinner." And sure enough, Alex called me the next day. I said, "Alex," I said, "give me the phone number to your foster parents." I said, "My kids would love to meet you." And he was like, "The
Mhm.
kids you write about in your book?" I was like, "No, I have a fake family." Um, Teenagers. I picked Alex up on that Saturday and I brought him to our house and I watched him in the backyard as he played with our kids. And Reese was like, "Let's go out to dinner tonight." And I was like, "What a good idea." We gathered the kids up. We went down to the local Mexican restaurant that we eat at least probably once a week.
Mhm.
And we sit down, and my son Tristan was 10. He sits down next to Alex and he says, "Alex, you can order anything off the menus, and my dads don't care." And Alex goes, "I can order anything." And Tristan goes, "I'm going to order the shrimp fajitas. And if I don't eat them all, I never get in trouble." And Amaya goes, "Alex, haven't you eaten a guapos?" Alex looked at my kids and said, "I don't remember the last time somebody ever took me to a restaurant." At that moment, Jessica, I realized as a parent, I'd done my job. I saw the empathy flow out of my children's eyes. We ate, went to Dave and Buster's, dropped Alex off at his foster parents' house. I get in the car and it's quiet. And all of a sudden, one of the kids said, "Daddy, we have to do something for Alex." I said, "I know. I just don't know what to do." And they said, "We have to bring him home." And I said, "What?" And they said, "We have to bring him home." I looked at my husband. He said, "What's one more?" My husband and I were the very first couple in the state of Maryland to petition the courts to have a child from foster care come and live with us without a stipend. The judge said to me, "Mr. Shear, why would you do this?" And I said to the judge, as I say to each and every one of you, every child deserves a foundation. Every
Mhm.
child deserves to know there's someone there rooting them on. Every child deserves to feel what it feels like to be loved unconditionally. I looked at my son and he was crying. He said, "Pops, you've changed my life." I said, "Nobody." I said, "You changed our lives." I said, "I only
Mhm.
have one regret." The judge said, "Mr. Shear, what is your regret?" And I said that I didn't get to walk him to kindergarten, but now I get to walk with him for the rest of his life. A year after that, we were in COVID. My son
Mhm.
looked at me and he said, "Pops, will you adopt me?" I said, "Why?" I said, "You're not going anywhere." He said, "No, I want to have the same last name as my sister and brothers and you and Dada." I called my adoption attorney and my husband and I legally adopted Alex. Our kids are now
Wow.
25, 21, 19, 19, 17. Thank you.
Wow. That's an amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And you've highlighted a lot of things about the foster care system. You've highlighted aging out, you've highlighted the trash bag. What would you say some of the other challenges that children and youth in the US foster care system often face?
Well, I mean, these are throwaway children. These are
Hmm.
kids it's an industry that makes money on the backs of children, and we don't care about the terrible outcomes as long as the checks are still coming in. And that's what we see. I mean, you're looking at 80% of our death row inmates were in foster care. You're
Hmm.
looking at close to 86% of our people who are experiencing homelessness were in foster care. Foster care is the root cause of the deterioration of our society when it comes to children. It is a system that is shattered and it has to
Hmm.
be rebuilt. Foster care, Jessica, always has to be here.
Yeah.
Always. Okay. But the problem is that we have used this too much to hold down those who are less fortunate than us.
Hmm.
64% of children who enter foster care enter because of one word, and that word is neglect. And
Hmm.
neglect is defined as poverty. Poverty. Mom can't afford the electricity, and so the neighbor calls CPS and takes the kid. Mom leaves the 5-year old home with the 12-year-old. Neighbor sees them. Neighbor calls CPS. And let me tell you the combined common denominator. Neighbor calls CPS. Explain to me what happened to the day when I walked to my fence and asked you for a cup of sugar?
Hmm.
What happened to the day where the neighbor walked to the neighbor and said, I haven't seen your lights on for 2 weeks. I see your kids disheveled. What can I do to help you? See,
Yeah.
the thing is that we have to get back to society where we take care of each other and not have a system try to take care because a system will only break us more.
Hmm. You highlighted so many great things there. Great, not as in good, but like great things to talk about, because I see that as a psychologist that works in pediatrics. I see that all the time, that children get removed from their home due to parents not being able to make ends meet, or a single mom having to work multiple jobs. So she is leaving her 10-year-old home watching the other kids, and then it's labeled as
She's not
neglect.
drugging. This is the thing that gets me. She's not out there drugging it up. She's not out there gangbanging. She's not out there trying to work the street. She is out there doing exactly what she's supposed to do as a parent, provide for her children. The problem is, we as a society do not pay a living wage.
Hmm.
And so, because we don't pay the living wage, she's not able to take care of her children. So, explain to me something. Why can we as a society give a total stranger a check to take
Hmm.
care of her children when if we just gave her that little bit of help, she could do it herself?
Hmm. Oh yeah.
Again,
Oh,
failure.
oh, I hear that argument all the time. It's like we're paying other people. And you and I obviously are not talking about the cases of
Of course.
severe abuse and things like that, which
And by the way, I have
obviously
two. I have
do
two
happen.
kids who arrived in my home bleeding of the brain, chicken baby syndrome, three broken ribs. One of my sons had his bio mother's boyfriend's initials are carved in him. So yeah, I know about abuse.
Hmm.
I was abused as a little boy. Never ever should my parents been parents. So those cases, but understand, that's only about 25% of the kids in foster
Yeah.
care. What about those other 75%? And between 64 and the 10%, that's drugs. That's
Hmm.
drugs. And we as a society, again, should be responsible for that. Drug addiction is no different than cancer. We have to cure it. We don't
Hmm.
just sit them and outcast them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but the argument that you were making, why are we not just giving that money towards the family? Because if it is neglect due to things like inability to pay bills, things like that, and this, I feel like you and I could get in a whole different discussion about like policies and things like that, which we don't obviously have to get into, but we're pushing for, people to have more kids, but don't have the structures put into place for these families to support
Right.
their kids, and then the kids are taken from their families. Once again, right now we're talking about that 75% of parents that maybe it's neglect due to inability to care, due to lack of money, resources,
Yeah.
finances,
And
things like
the
that.
thing is that we also have to look at the parents whose children have come into the system. And I've had people say to me, well, why didn't they fight harder for their kids? Well, let me tell you something. As somebody who knows how the system works, it is a hill that is so hard
Mhm.
to climb. And when you are a parent who has been bashed and bashed and bashed, sometimes it's hard to stand up. Simple as
Mhm.
that. Sometimes it's hard to stand up. And so I want to be there for those parents because, I have two kids out of two of my five kids should have never been in foster care.
Really?
Simple as
Wow.
that. Yeah. And, I am very fortunate that my husband and I have always had the attitude that, our children know they have a life story.
Mhm.
And so I have a relationship with that bio family. And
Wonderful.
I'm happy because of that, because just sucks. Shit, the mom had she just had a terrible, terrible, terrible upbringing.
Mhm.
And she just made bad choices. And by the way, I want people to realize something. Life is about choices. It's not about environment. People used to say all the time, my mother was a product of her environment. She married 6 times, 10. No, she wasn't. My mother was a product of her choices. Okay. And that's what we must understand, is that we're a product of our choices. And that's what we have to realize, is that we might make a good choice today, doesn't mean we have to make the good choice tomorrow.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, so you mentioned a few moments ago, when you were talking about the foster care system, all the bad outcomes that children and youth experience. And obviously, this is a psychology podcast. So
Right.
I want to talk about mental health and the,
And by
I
the
know
way,
this could be
my therapist. I tell this to people all the time. My therapist is one of my best friends. I got through life with because of Dr. Rich. Okay. I tell people you embrace therapy. So my family, we embrace therapy. I got to where I'm at today because of forgiveness and therapy.
I love it. I love it. So, what is the connection between the US foster care system and mental health? What are common mental health outcomes? You already mentioned, not directly, but indirectly, you know, death row, inmates, things like that. And we know in the US, the prison system is the number one provider of quote unquote mental health care
Yeah.
because we're locking up people that have mental health and substance use issues, rather than providing them treatment. But yeah, what has been your experience? What have you seen, with all the work you've done
I
when it
mean, the
comes to
thing
mental
is
health?
that you have to realize that, when you're taken from your family of origin, no matter how that family is, you got trauma that starts right there. And
Absolutely.
so, and you never know when that trauma is going to come out, by the way. So let's understand that as well, and I'll give a good example. I know of a young man who, was adopted at a very, very young age and no problems whatsoever. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, turns 21 and gets diagnosed as schizophrenia. Guess what? Find out that, birth parent had schizophrenia. So, there's so many things, by the way, that could have happened to your birth kid as well.
Mhm.
And so I think that we must understand in foster care is that these kids immediately, when they come in the system, therapy has to start. I'm
Mhm.
reading case files where, they're saying, oh, well, they didn't start therapy. He was, no, therapy must start with every single kid who comes into foster care, Jessica. It has to be
Yeah.
mandatory. Do you realize that it's not mandatory?
So I know it's not mandatory because one of my internships when I was in my graduate program was with kids in the foster care system. And sometimes parents were mandated if they wanted to get their child back, but none of the kids I worked
Yeah.
with were mandated to be there.
Yeah.
It was usually like a recommendation from the guardian ad litem or their case manager, or like the family recognized that trauma. But
Yeah, and
yeah.
and let me tell you. So, I mean, our son Mackay, my son Mackay has was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. A doctor, when he was roughly 2 years old, said that he was never going to talk,
Wow.
and because that was put in his case file, social workers made the choice that he would no longer get OT, speech therapy. And my husband and I pushed back. Nope, 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 nope. So we've hired an educational attorney, and
Hmm.
we sued the District of Columbia.
Wow.
And I was a foster parent when that happened. And I sued the District of Columbia for my son to get speech therapy. He was a kid in foster care. We
Hmm.
hadn't even filed adoption, had no, I just was like seeing this kid in the system and nobody was like freaking fighting for him. And he
Yeah.
was just because one freaking doctor said he wasn't going to speak, who the hell are you to say this kid wasn't going to speak? They were saying that he was autistic at that time. They didn't even say he had fetal alcohol syndrome. And so anyway, so we hired an education attorney, we sued, we ended up winning. My son ended up getting like 270 hours. And I remember sitting in the courtroom and the judge said, Mr. Shears, the District of Columbia will order the District of Columbia to pay for the attorney fees. And I said, no. I said, I can pay for my own attorney fees. I
Mhm.
said, I just want you to give my son exactly what he's deserved. The social worker says in the courtroom, he's not your son, he's a foster child. The judge was like, if you ever speak out again in my court, I will find you in contempt. But can you believe that? That's the mindset that we're talking about,
Yeah.
Jessica. Is that so again,
Gosh.
the people don't want the great outcome that we can have by doing
Mhm.
these, preactive, therapy. Come to find out, we adopt our son, thinking he was, autistic. And, at that time he had already started, by the time we adopted him, he had started walking, he was saying some words.
Mhm.
But I remember we took him to Children's Hospital and we had all these tests done and we found out that his frontal lobe wasn't developed properly. He had fetal alcohol syndrome.
Mhm.
And I remember the doctor saying, this is probably the best you're going to get out of him. And I looked at the doctors and I said, I guess you truly have never met a Sheer. I said, because we never say never. By the way,
Yeah.
my son is going to be 20 this year. He has almost a full scholarship to Lynn University. He is studying cybersecurity,
Oh
minoring in
my goodness.
public speaking, and is the most amazing young man you could ever imagine. Um,
Yeah.
Children are resilient, Jessica.
Hmm.
Don't ever forget that. Children are resilient. And when you put the right people in front of them and you give them the right tools and you
Hmm.
make sure that they know that they are loved, they can do
Hmm.
anything.
Yeah. What you just said there is exactly what I was thinking as you were talking. It took you and your husband advocating, seeking out the essential resources because, like you said, these things are not required and often not paid for. So then it goes back to access. And, like, yes, some foster families may have the means and their heart in the right place to say, fine, I'll just pay out of pocket because, yes, this child may not be legally mine on paper right now, but this child is my child and I'm going to do whatever I can for them. And we know that's not always the case, but like you said, we have to be willing to give these kids the supports and tools and research, whether that's mental health therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, just community. You've brought up
All of that.
community so many times.
Let me, I've been watching throughout the years, and I have actually helped some states pass bills and about foster care. But the thing that has really bugged me the most is when I see these governors pounding their chest about paying tuition for kids in foster care for their state. Listen up, kids need more than just tuition paid. They
Hmm.
need complete wraparound services. Just writing a check because of some books isn't going to deal with all the trauma that these kids have been
Yeah.
dealing with. So if we don't tackle that immediately with wraparound services, we're going to be back in the situation they're in right now, where we see our death row inmates. I mean, seriously, foster care is a pipeline to the penitentiary. Simple as that. And when
Yeah.
you talk about the good foster parents, let's be honest. I mean, they're few and far between. I mean, I've said this so many times as a speaker, is like, you know, I live on the side of the tracks. I'm very fortunate that I live on
Hmm.
those tracks. I worked very hard to get here. But I also said to my minister not long ago, when's the last time a social worker has ever asked, could they talk to my congregation about foster care? Never,
Hmm.
Never. Let me explain the reason why. Because I live in a town. We have no apartments, we have no condos, we have no townhouses. We have single family homes, and people think just because we're seven-figured people, we don't care about children. That's bullshit. We
Yeah.
actually do, but nobody ever comes and asks and talks to us. But let me tell you something. You'll go ahead and you'll put on the bus stop about being a foster parent. Call here and sign up to be a foster parent at a bus stop. Why? Because it's easier to go and get lower income when you're thinking about a financial,
Hmm.
experience,
Yeah.
um, instead of approaching this as we should be. First way we should be approaching this is by churches. See, churches get all these damn tax breaks. Why are they not stepping up and helping our children? They should be the first
Yeah.
ones doing something. They should be the ones paying these electric bills for these single moms and opening up their daycare doors for free daycare for these people. That's what we should be doing. That's when we're going to see a change in our system, Jessica.
Hmm. Well, you just took the words right out of my mouth. I said I was thinking this is systems change
Yeah.
that is needed.
But I said to you in the beginning, you're not going to see a system change as long as we're making money on the backs of children.
Hmm.
Because those people that are making those choices don't want the change because that affects their dollar.
Hmm. Yeah.
I
And
mean, you look, you got U.S. child welfare officers, welfare directors making six figures.
no, it it hurts my heart and also makes me very angry at the same time. Which both can coexist. And
Very
going
true.
back to something you said much earlier, but I want to tie it into mental health when you were sharing your own story and I believe Alex's story. You were talking about just going from home to home, switching schools, things like that. And we've talked about trauma. You're being ripped from your family, but then there's also that lack of stability. There's the lack of chance to keep a consistent community or family. I think you mentioned a statistic at the very beginning of our conversation. Was it 75% of children in foster care don't stay
Sibling.
with their siblings?
Yeah, 75% of kids who come into foster care with a sibling get split up. Can you just imagine? You
Yeah.
know, I mean, it's one of the reasons why Reese and I have two sets of siblings, is
Hmm.
because Reese had made the decision, and I do say Reese because my husband did not grow up in foster care. My
Hmm.
husband did not. I mean, foster care wasn't even a word he probably ever even mentioned in his family. My husband's parents been married 50 some odd years. He grew up in the Midwest. He's very, very educated. So my
Hmm.
husband didn't have any of that. But my husband was the catapult. He was the one who was like, we're not splitting up siblings. We're gonna make sure that our kids have all the things and so, and
Hmm.
by the way, I have four kids of color, you know.
Hmm.
So my husband and I, when I told you, like we didn't know any gay people had kids, much less. Not even kidding you. When we adopted our kids, we had to hire a bonding study expert. We had to hire an expert that came in and said that my husband and I were not going to change our kids because we were white and they were black. We also had to bring in an expert who said that my husband and I weren't going to turn our three boys gay. Yeah.
What? Sorry,
Yeah.
like that like just took me like a
Yes.
solid three
Yes,
seconds to
I'm not
process.
kidding you. I'm not kidding you. We had to bring in an expert stating that my husband and I were not. And by the way, let me tell you something. My kids, as I told you earlier, they're now 17, 19,
Hmm.
19. My boys are 17, 19, 19, and 25.
Okay.
Not one of my kids like show tunes. Not one of my kids like the theater. Not one of my kids do dance. Not one of my kids have done that. So the thing is that all that bullshit where you worried because we were gay, we were going to turn our kids gay, didn't happen. Okay.
Yeah.
And we couldn't even get them to like share. So I don't know what that was about.
Yeah. But you're also bringing up another issue that I've heard from a lot of individuals of, certain states having legislation of not allowing gay couples to foster or adopt. And you're eliminating, but not you, like the foster
Right.
care
No, I
system is
agree.
eliminating
And by the way, my
potential loving
kids
homes.
don't care.
Yeah.
My kids don't care. I'm not kidding. It is not a topic. It's nothing. My kids' friends don't care.
Hmm.
My kids' friends' parents don't care. So all of this society who thinks my husband and I, 21 years been together. We've had our kids for 17 and a half years. We live, like all other families. Yesterday we had prom. The day before we had a track meet.
Hmm.
I travel as a public speaker. My husband right now, he's in this garage with my son cleaning the garage out. Life is just happens to be we're two people of the same sex, but we're
Hmm.
not any different, not any
Yeah.
different.
No,
Listen,
absolutely.
Jessica, I want to say thank you. Thank you for this conversation. Thank you for, you know, giving this platform and educating people because I think that for us in society, if we end our day by educating somebody with something they didn't know, it's going to make our tomorrow
Hmm.
stronger. And that to me is what's so important.
Yeah. No, thank you. I have learned so much about you, and I can see how passionate you are about foster care, about helping others, about systems change. And, we are getting towards the end of our conversation, but I know we could talk about so many different
Oh
things
my
that
gosh.
need
I
to
was like, we
change.
should do part two.
We could, but need to change in the system because I know you said it's a broken system.
No, 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 no. It's not broken. Because let me tell you
Oh,
something. When something is broken, you can take super glue and put it back together. When something is shattered, it has to be rebuilt. And the
okay.
system is shattered.
Okay, so we need to rebuild the system because it's
Has to be
shattered,
rebuilt.
not broken. I
There's
appreciate that.
nothing of this system that we need to keep.
Okay. So I guess as we're wrapping up, getting towards the end of the conversation, if people are listening and they're like, okay, I have learned so much from Rob about the foster care system, and I want to do something. I want to get involved, whether that be with comfort cases, whether that be with advocacy, whether that be becoming a foster parent, whatever type
Be
of
a
involvement.
doer. Be a doer. I say this quite often. We are all taught that the world goes around on an axle. That is not true. The world goes around for the doers that push it every single day. I tell people all the time, be a doer. Not all of us have a passion for children, but as long as you have a passion, that's what matters. If you're interested in foster care, come to comfortcases.org, visit us, send me an email, info@comfortcases.org. I will continue this conversation. If you have a thought that you might may think of considering being a foster parent, reach out
Mhm.
to me. If you have the thought that you might want to mentor a child, a kid, a young person from foster care, reach out to me. I say this quite often. Every single person, we have an opportunity to make tomorrow brighter and
Mhm.
stop lying to our youth. Jessica, let me tell you, we've heard this so much. The elders would say, invest in a child, you invest in their future. Such a
Mhm.
lie. We've lied to people saying that crap. When you invest in a child, you actually invest in my future. You invest in your future
Mhm.
because they're our leaders of tomorrow. So
Yeah.
it just makes sense. It makes
Mhm.
total sense. So again, reach out, comfortcases.org, email me at info@comfortcases.org, and I'd love to continue the conversation.
Awesome. So I usually ask my guests where people can connect with you. So you said comfortcases.org, info@comfortcases.org for email. Where can
You
people
can you
buy
can
your
find me
books,
on.
listen to your podcasts, connect
Yes,
on
yes. You can
socials,
listen
all
to
those
my. So
things?
I'm in my seventh season of Fostering Change. It is, thanks to my amazing producer. It's award-winning. Um, and yeah, you can go to Fostering Change. You can follow me at Rob Scheer. Hey, if you have HBO Max, you can jump right over to HBO Max and watch Somewhat Familiar. Episode 5 is my family. This amazing documentary. If you have Apple, jump over to and watch Dads, directed by my amazing friend Bryce Dallas Howard. She directed a documentary with her dad Ron Howard and my husband and I, and so
Hmm.
amazing documentary called Dads. And who knows? I hear that there might be a second book coming out in the next 24 months. Who knows?
Um, I am definitely tonight going to go to HBO Max and watch
Oh,
episode 5.
yeah,
I'm
somewhat
somewhat
familiar. And matter of
familiar.
fact, let me tell you something. All of the episodes are phenomenal,
Hmm.
okay? But but we're in episode 5.
Okay.
But but they're all my friend Pedro, he is the director and the producer of the show. And I'm so actually my family, we're so honored that we were chosen to be in that show. So yeah, tune on, get every tune on. And again, just reach out. I love to have a good conversation, by the way, everybody.
I can tell this has been such a treat and a pleasure, and I will put all those links and everything in the show notes of this episode. Rob, as we are wrapping up, is there anything else that you would like to share? Anything that we haven't touched on? Any last final words before we end the episode?
I think that each and every one of us just wake up tomorrow and wake up every day realizing that, you know what? What am I going to do today to put a smile on someone's face? That's all you have to think of is what I'm going to do today to put a smile on someone's face. I've said this to our kids since they were little. Do your acts of three.
Mhm.
Hold the door for somebody that you don't know, and do not hold the door for a thank you. Hold the door because it's the right thing to do. Smile at somebody, total stranger. You don't know if that smile is the last thing that they get, and they need it. And then I have told my kids, if you see that kid sitting at the lunch table by themselves, go sit with them. Go sit with them because each and every one of us have a story, and you never know how our story will impact somebody. So tell it.
I love that. And I just want to end on for anybody not watching on video, Rob Shirt says, be a good human, which I think is a great summary of
Be a
our
good you.
conversation
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
So,
Be a good human.
once again, thank you so much for
Thank
coming on. I
you.
love this conversation. Like I said earlier, learned so much from you, can hear your passion and energy, not only about the foster care system and comfort cases, but also, and most importantly, how much you love being a dad, which that shone through in this entire conversation. So just thank you taking time out of your schedule to be here today.
And by the way, anybody who tunes into the video, those are my kids that are behind me on the wall. So, have a great day, everybody. Take care.
And thank you for listening for today's episode of Psych Talk, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Psych Talk. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Don't forget to follow me on all socials at Jessica Lee, PhD, and the podcast at Psych Talk Podcast on Instagram.